Cold open, The Boy Who Lived a Double Life. What if Harry Potter spent 7 years hiding not just from Voldemort, but from his own girlfriend? What if the boy who lived wasn't only protecting the wizarding world, but protecting one specific person from ever being connected to his name? Today, we deconstruct a timeline where Harry Potter lives a double life. In the original series, Harry is framed as isolated, the orphan under the stairs, the chosen one, who only gradually discovers that his greatest power is love. But reality is rarely so narratively tidy. Imagine the psychological fracture if, somewhere between troll attacks and Quidditch practices, there is a girl whose existence cannot enter the narrative, a relationship so dangerous that it never reaches the page, the films, or even the epilogue. Picture the invisibility cloak. Canon gives us a boy sneaking through corridors to eavesdrop on staff meetings, to follow suspicious teachers, to hunt Horcruxes. Now reframe that image, the same cloak, the same stone floors, but his destination is a disused classroom, the edge of the lake, the shadow of the greenhouses, where a girl waits who cannot be seen with him without rewriting the entire war. The core issue is mechanical. Every secret meeting is a logistical nightmare and a tactical risk. This is not just a ship AU. It is a structural intervention. If Harry's greatest weakness is love, what happens when that love is concentrated into one hidden person Voldemort must never discover? The prophecy turns from abstract destiny into a daily operational problem. Every vision, every scar twinge, every occlumency lesson is no longer about protecting strategic information. It is about shielding one forbidden memory, her face. The emotional stakes spike immediately. Secrecy is not romantic, it is corrosive. One slip of the tongue from Ron in the common room, one careless reference from Hermione in the library, one raised eyebrow from Ginny across the Gryffindor table, and the entire dynamic of Hogwarts security changes. The subtext is brutal. Harry is no longer only afraid of dying. He is afraid of being the reason someone else dies because he dared to love them. Now insert the usual suspects. Snape prowling the corridors, reading minds. Umbridge weaponizing surveillance. Draco watching for leverage. Each of them becomes a direct threat to this invisible girl, whether she is a Muggle-born Ravenclaw, a Slytherin from a compromised family, or even a Muggle he visits in stolen weekends under the cloak. Their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated the moment she exists. The turning point arrives once we realize this doesn't just color the margins, it rewires the canon. Chamber of Secrets is no longer simply about a basilisk and a diary. It is about whether Harry risks exposing her to investigate the attacks. The Triwizard Tournament isn't just spectacle. Every task is another opportunity for her to be targeted. The Department of Mysteries, the cave, the tower, the walk into the Forbidden Forest. Each event acquires a second, hidden script. So in this episode, we ask, how does a secret girlfriend fracture the boy, the war, and the ending we thought we understood? Defining her. Who is Harry's secret girlfriend? To answer that, we have to do something very unromantic. We have to define her. On paper, there are 3 dominant archetypes. Each generates a different psychological pressure on Harry, a different fracture in the timeline. A Muggle girl from Little Whinging would anchor him to pre-Hogwarts reality, forcing midnight phone calls, falsified Dudley's friend, alibis, and a constant negotiation between magic and the banal horror of GCSS. A DA-era Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff would embed the romance inside the Resistance itself. Shared meetings, coded glances over shield charms, loyalty forged in cramped classrooms, and corridors that smell of fear and chalk dust. Compelling. But the core issue is mechanical. For the secrecy to matter, the relationship must sit at the exact intersection of war, blood, and ideology. That pushes us toward the third archetype, a Slytherin half-blood in Harry's year, someone who quietly opposes Voldemort while living inside his recruiting ground. This is where the divergence is finalized. A Muggle girlfriend endangers the statute and drags the Dursleys into open conflict. A DA girlfriend folds too neatly into the existing narrative. A Slytherin forces the story to rewire its moral geometry. So, in this reconstruction, she is Slytherin, half-blood, with a father on the fringes of Death Eater circles, and a mother buried in the Ministry bureaucracy. Her surname is whispered in Nocturne Alley, but her mother files parchment in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and pretends not to hear. At home, the dinner table is a quiet war about power and purity. At Hogwarts, she plays the role. Calculated, cold on the surface, precise with her magic. Underneath, the subtext is brutal. She knows that if anyone discovers she is emotionally entangled with Harry Potter, she becomes either a trophy or a target. Why must it stay secret? Because Voldemort uses relationships as leverage long before he uses wands. Because Snape can walk through minds. Because Dumbledore, in his more ruthless calculations, might try to move her around the board as a piece, not a person. Publicly, she must be at best indifferent to Harry, at worst, mildly antagonistic. Privately, she is the one person he can talk to about hating his own legend. Mechanically, Hogwarts itself becomes their accomplice. The Room of Requirement stops being just a DA headquarters and turns into a sanctuary calibrated to occlumency practice, silencing charms, and maps of secret passages. They use the Vanishing Cabinet corridor not for smuggling Death Eaters, but for smuggling conversations. She trains herself in basic occlumency, not to hide from Voldemort initially, but to keep Snape from seeing his face when she thinks about hope. Harry, whose mind is canonically porous, now has a concrete reason to master mental defense, not for Dumbledore's orders, but to protect the single forbidden memory of her hand in his. The thematic stakes escalate immediately. She is his refuge from the war, the one space where he is not the boy who lived, but a boy who is tired. Simultaneously, she is his greatest vulnerability. If Voldemort identifies her, she becomes leverage more devastating than Sirius, more destabilizing than the Weasleys. Her capture would not just threaten Harry's body, but his will to continue. And in that pressure cooker, another question emerges. When the turning point arrives, does he choose the war, or does he choose her? In the next section, we deconstruct a timeline where that choice stops being hypothetical and starts rewriting every major canon event. The divergence, when their paths cross. So when does that choice actually crystallize? When does this secret stop being an abstract vulnerability and start being a living presence in Harry's day-to-day reality? The turning point arrives in a place that is almost aggressively ordinary for Hogwarts, not the Forbidden Forest. The library. We position the divergence in late first year. After the troll, after the Mirror of Erised, once Harry has tasted magic and heroism, but before the Chamber of Secrets carves a permanent groove of martyrdom into his psychology. He is there for a simple reason: hiding. Fame has already turned the corridors into a surveillance grid. Whispers follow him between charms and potions. The library, in his mind, is the one remaining structure where he can pretend to be anonymous. She ruins that assumption by doing something no one else does. She tells him to move. He has spread his books across an entire table, a small territorial claim against a world that keeps claiming him. And a quiet, precise voice says, "You don't own the desk, you know." Concrete action, then immediate fracture. He looks up, expecting awe or fear, or that brittle, breathless tone people reserve for the boy who lived. Instead, he meets a pair of steady, assessing eyes set above green and silver trim. Slytherin, second year, half-blood on paper, but with a father who does contract work for known Death Eater families. The subtext is brutal. She occupies a social fault line that Gryffindor never really has to map. Her name can vary in your headcanon, but her function in the dynamic is fixed. She is the first person at Hogwarts who treats Harry's scar as a data point instead of a destiny. She slides her books down, sits without waiting for permission, and continues copying an arithmancy chart. No fawning, no flinching. When Madame Pince snaps at a nearby Hufflepuff, Harry instinctively ducks. She does not. She just smirks, a tiny, controlled response that says she has survived far worse than an irritable librarian. In that moment, the core issue is mechanical. Every existing relationship in Harry's life reinforces his symbolic role. This one does not. Over the next weeks, the encounters accumulate. A shared table becomes shared homework, then shared silences. She calls him Potter, with the same dry neutrality Snape uses, but without the malice. When he mutters that everyone is staring again after a Quidditch match, she does not reassure him. She simply says, "Then stop giving them a show," and returns to her notes. For a boy drowning in projection, this restraint is intoxicating. So why the secrecy? Because Hogwarts runs on house loyalties and bloodline rumors, and this financial technicality forces a brutal calculus. Her father's business ties place her adjacent to the very power trying to kill him. Ron would see green and silver and stop there. Dumbledore, ever the strategist, would see potential leverage, or worse, a risk to be managed at arm's length. Harry realizes this in a corridor outside the library when Filch's footsteps send them diving behind a tapestry. pressed into darkness. Hearing the caretaker mutter about rotten Slytherins, he feels her hand grip his sleeve, steady rather than scared. He understands, with a sudden, cold clarity, that if anyone maps this connection, they will try to edit it out of his life for his own good. In that breathless pocket of shadow, the divergence is finalized. He chooses not to tell Ron, he chooses not to tell Dumbledore, and as he walks back to Gryffindor Tower, rehearsing a lie for the first time, another question surfaces. When the chamber opens, and the school starts hunting Slytherin suspects, does he protect his house, or does he protect her? He will not be able to do both. Year 2, Rewritten, Chamber of Secrets, and the First Test. Year 2 does not begin with flying cars and rogue house elves. It begins with a private calculation. How many ways can Hogwarts kill the girl no one knows he loves? Every petrification shifts that calculation. In canon, the attacks are a mystery to be solved and a threat to the school in the abstract. Here, each stiff, glass-eyed body is a rehearsal for a horror Harry cannot name. Walking into the hospital wing and seeing her there, frozen, her secret preserved only because she cannot speak. The psychological fracture is simple and savage. Hogwarts is not just dangerous, it is a loaded corridor she has to walk through every day. The core issue is mechanical. If she is in Slytherin, the entire house becomes a crime scene. Ron vents in the common room, tossing off sweeping condemnations of all the snakes, and Harry nods along because the performance is required to protect his own cover. But the moment they separate, he is in a disused classroom with her, undoing the damage in low, furious whispers, that he does not believe she is the heir, that he knows what prejudice feels like, that loyalty to her is not a betrayal of Gryffindor, but a rejection of the school's lazy binaries. The subtext is brutal. To keep her safe, he has to publicly feed the narrative that makes her unsafe. We deconstruct a timeline where the diary is no longer just a cursed object, but a proof of concept. Voldemort can infiltrate the castle and puppeteer a child from the inside. When Ginny begins to fade, Harry is not only terrified for Ron's sister, he is confronted with a new, invasive reality. If a fragment of Tom Riddle can slip into Ginny's mind through ink and page, what stops the next one from finding his girlfriend, from weaponizing her loneliness, her house's isolation, her fear that Harry might secretly agree with Ron? Specific scenes bend under this pressure. The night he is supposed to drag Lockhart to the chamber, there is a prior commitment, a hidden meeting behind a tapestry near the Slytherin common room. For a heartbeat, he hesitates. Does he keep the date or save the school? He chooses Ginny, but the guilt is architectural. He runs to Lockhart's office with the knowledge that, had he been 10 minutes weaker, he would have abandoned a dying girl to keep a promise. Later, when he first hears the basilisk's voice in the walls, he tells no one in Gryffindor. Instead, he finds her, hands shaking, and blurts it out in pieces. She believes him instantly. That belief becomes the only safe place he has. The turning point arrives in the chamber itself. Wand broken, phoenix feathers drifting. He is not picturing Hogwarts as an institution. He is picturing her walking these tunnels one day, or never walking them, because the war came upstairs instead. When he chooses to go on without the adults, he is choosing a future in which she is not permanently stalked by a resurrected diary, a resurrected Dark Lord, or the next cursed object that slips through the cracks. He is not just saving Ginny, he is attempting to engineer a world where loving him is not a death sentence, and Dumbledore, watching afterwards, has no idea that this is what Harry has already decided he is willing to die for. Pattern, interrupt, a Slytherin in Harry's heart. So what happens when the girl he is engineering that world for does not wear scarlet and gold, but green and silver? The turning point arrives in the quiet places. Not in the chamber, not on a Quidditch pitch, but in a narrow stone corridor outside the dungeons, where torches burn low and footsteps echo too loudly. She passes him a folded bit of parchment as they cross in opposite directions, fingers brushing for half a second too long. To anyone else, it is nothing. To them, it is a life. Daily reality in this timeline is built from these small, dangerous transactions. A whispered argument half hidden behind a tapestry near the Slytherin entrance. A Transfiguration essay passed forward in class, the back covered in cramped notes about which older students have started talking in hushed tones about the Dark Lord's return. A detention with Snape, where Harry is not only terrified of being caught cheating, but of Snape glimpsing an expression when she answers a question. A fracture in the performance of mutual hatred. From her perspective, Slytherin is not a villain's lair, it is a pressure cooker. She walks into a common room lined with ancestral faces, with owls arriving from parents who measure affection in blood purity and future influence. She knows which boy laughs too loudly because he is afraid his father will pull him out of school if he is not convincingly cruel, which girl parrots slurs because silence at the dinner table is worse. The subtext is brutal, be useful, be ambitious, or be expendable. This is where the core issue is mechanical. Canon Harry can dismiss Slytherin as a monolith because he only sees its public interface. Draco's taunts, Snape's sneers, the structural loyalty to Voldemort. In this altered timeline, the divergence is finalized the first time his girlfriend quietly says, "If they knew I was talking to you, my mother would hex my memory clean." He cannot write off a house when the person he loves most is mapping its internal fractures for him. She becomes his informant, but not in a spy thriller sense. It is more domestic, more psychological. Over pumpkin juice and stolen minutes in the library, she explains how a terrified second year repeated a curse he overheard at home, how a prefect flinched when someone mentioned Azkaban. Harry starts to understand that Slytherin is full of children, trying to survive the expectations of adults who already chose a side. This reframing ricochets through his dynamic with Draco and Snape. Draco stops being a cartoon antagonist and becomes the loudest symptom of a diseased family system his girlfriend is also trapped in. Snape's cruelty takes on a new edge when Harry realizes that every point he deducts from Gryffindor is watched by Slytherins calculating how to perform for him. Reality becomes layered. Every insult has an audience he cannot see. The cost is immediate. To protect her, Harry has to lie to the people who equal safety. He tells Ron he is going to the library alone. He tells Hermione he is meeting Dumbledore. He smiles at Molly Weasley over Christmas dinner while editing out an entire human being from his stories. Each omission is a small betrayal, a rehearsal for the much larger deceptions the war will demand. His emotional maturity accelerates because it has to. Children brag, adults curate, and then we hit the pattern interrupt. Picture the room of requirement during Order of the Phoenix. Cushions on the floor, DA members practicing disarming charms, Neville beaming when he manages a shield. Now imagine, long after everyone leaves, the door opening one more time. A Slytherin girl steps through, wrapping her green and silver scarf tighter, not as a spy, not as a traitor to her house, but as Harry's most trusted ally. No one else even knows she was there. Fire and Dragons, the Triwizard Tournament with a hidden weakness. She closes the room of requirement door behind her, and with it, the illusion that their connection is optional. From this point in the timeline, every public risk Harry takes has a private cost he cannot explain. So when the Goblet of Fire spits out his name, the shock in the Great Hall hits on two levels. To everyone else, it is an outrageous breach of magical protocol, a boy thrown into a deadly game. To Harry, it is something colder, a structural announcement that anyone attached to him has just become leverage. Being forced into the tournament doesn't only endanger his life, it paints a fluorescent target on everyone close to him, including the one person no one even knows to guard. The core issue is mechanical. In canon, Dumbledore and Moody can focus protection around the boy who lived as a single point of failure. In this fractured reality, the security problem is distributed. There is a Slytherin girl whose name never gets spoken in the Order's meetings, whose schedule no one tracks, whose house is already under suspicion. Harry understands, with a clarity that feels almost adult, that if any Death Eater sympathizer realizes where his eyes keep drifting, the tournament becomes an open season on her. Now rewatch the first task with that in mind. Harry walks into the arena to face a dragon, but his attention is split, his gaze ricocheting between the Horntail and the stands. He knows Karkaroff is watching. He knows Moody is calculating. Every time his eyes flick toward the Slytherin section, he forces himself to redirect, to stare instead at Ron, Hermione, or even Malfoy, constructing a decoy pattern of concern. The subtext is brutal. The more he loves her, the more he must pretend she is irrelevant. His victory is not just summoning the firebolt, it is surviving 10 minutes of terror without letting his expression betray the real hostage in the crowd. This tension mutates the Yule Ball. On paper, Harry's awkwardness with Cho looks the same, stammering, late, overshadowed by Cedric, but internally, the dynamic is warped. How do you ask Cho Chang to the ball when you are already in a relationship you can never acknowledge? He is not simply shy, he is performing an acceptable script. He dances badly, laughs at the right moments, and feels her watching from the shadows, a Slytherin girl in green and silver, feigning indifference, while he plays the role of eligible champion. It is not romance, it is cover. Then, the second task arrives, and the lake exposes the fracture. What you'll sorely miss does not present her. Ron is taken instead. On the surface, this is a relief. She is safe on the shore, but underneath, it hurts. Does the magic not recognize their bond? Did Dumbledore's ignorance overwrite reality? They walk away with a paradoxical comfort. The relationship is magically under the radar, which protects her, but it also confirms how alone they are in this secret. And in the graveyard, when the divergence is finalized with Voldemort's resurrection using Harry's blood, a new terror crystallizes. If the Dark Lord can ever see through their shared connection, if he can ever raid Harry's mind, what image will surface first? Hogwarts or her face? And what happens when Voldemort realizes the boy who lived has already given him the perfect hostage? Order of the Phoenix, anger, occlumency, and the forbidden memory. Order of the Phoenix opens with a boy on a swing in Little Whinging, but in this timeline, he is not only cut off from Hogwarts and the Order, he is cut off from the one person who understands the double exposure of his life, the boy who lived, and the boy entangled in Slytherin politics. The silence is not just strategic, it is personal. Grimmauld Place becomes a quarantine zone for emotion. In canon, Harry's rage detonates against Ron, Hermione, even Sirius, because he feels abandoned and infantilized. Here, that rage has an extra vector. She has been ordered away from headquarters, her family's Slytherin ties making her too politically volatile for the Order's safe house. The core issue is mechanical. Dumbledore is not only withholding information, he is severing the one line of psychological continuity Harry has between school and war. The subtext is brutal. Your heart is now a security risk. So when he shouts, when he smashes things, the viewer has to ask, is he angry at the Daily Prophet, or at the empty chair where she would have sat at the kitchen table, rolling her eyes at Sirius and Snape in equal measure? Back at Hogwarts, Umbridge doesn't just represent institutional cruelty, she represents a structural annihilation of their claim to normalcy. Educational decrees criminalize informal gatherings, her inquisitorial squad prowls the corridors, and bloodquills turn detentions into scarification rituals. For most students, the Room of Requirement is a sanctuary for learning defensive magic. For Harry and his secret girlfriend, every DA meeting is also a covert operation in relationship maintenance. One missed session could be dismissed as homework, 3 in a row, and someone asks questions. Every brush of hands when she passes him a practice wand, every half second too long when their eyes meet after a successful Patronus, becomes a tactical error they cannot afford. We deconstruct a timeline where occlumency is no longer an abstract discipline imposed by a distant headmaster. It is an existential necessity. When Snape orders, "Clear your mind," Harry is not thinking about prophecy. He is thinking about the memory of her asleep in an armchair in the common room, a potions essay sliding from her fingers, about whispered contingency plans for escape routes if the war reaches the castle, about the way her face looked when she admitted her family might choose Voldemort. These are not memories he is willing to let a Death Eater, even a double agent, see. His failure in canon is emotional leakage. Here, the motivation to build walls is ferocious. The DA's internal dynamic shifts. Publicly, she attends with calculated distance, one more student nodding through Harry's lectures on Expelliarmus and Protego. Privately, she is his strategist and morale officer, dissecting spell progress, proposing drills that mirror Slytherin dueling traditions, warning him which purebloods might crack under pressure. To the room, she is almost indifferent. To Harry, she is the person who says, when everyone else leaves, you're pushing them too hard, or more dangerously, you're not pushing them hard enough. The turning point arrives with the corridor visions. When Voldemort plants the image of Sirius tortured in the Department of Mysteries, the fracture in Harry's decision-making becomes lethal. In canon, he rushes. Here, hesitation intrudes. If he goes, she will try to follow. If she follows, the mask drops, the secret detonates, and Voldemort acquires not just a Godfather-shaped lure, but a living pressure point. So the question is no longer only, is this a trap? It becomes, can I save Sirius without exposing her to the Dark Lord's gaze? And what happens to a 16-year-old's judgment when every path to the Ministry risks turning his forbidden memory into Voldemort's favorite weapon? Sirius, the Department of Mysteries, and the cost of a lie. So when the vision hits, it doesn't just show Sirius writhing in pain, it shows the potential erasure of the only people Harry cannot bear to lose. Walk through that corridor outside Umbridge's office with him. His scar is burning, his breath is shallow, and the structure of his decision-making is already compromised by months of sleep deprivation and psychological siege. In canon, he is thinking about Sirius and Dumbledore's distance. In this timeline, a second fear threads through the panic. If he vanishes into the Ministry and never comes back, she will have no idea where he went. No explanation, no body, just absence. The subtext is brutal. Dying is one thing. Abandoning her by accident is another. So what does he do with that terror? He doubles down on secrecy. He cannot tell McGonagall because that invites questions about why Voldemort would choose Sirius as bait. He cannot tell Snape because Snape has already prowled the edges of that forbidden memory and occlumency. And he cannot tell her, the girl waiting 2 floors down in the library, because to say, I saw Sirius in the Department of Mysteries, is to admit that there is a prophecy that Voldemort is inside his head, that she is already in the blast radius. The core issue is mechanical. Every adult who might help is also a potential leak that could carry her existence to the Dark Lord. Here, the turning point arrives. Does she let him go? Or does she, armed with Slytherin whispers about false visions and lures, step into his path and say, very quietly, that this feels engineered? We deconstruct a timeline where she does exactly that, where she repeats rumors about the Dark Lord planting images, where she notes the timing, Umbridge's clampdown, the convenient isolation. Harry hears every word. He still walks past her, because he cannot reveal the prophecy, he cannot show her the full pattern, and without that data, her caution reads to him as delay. In his mind, every second they argue is another second Sirius is tortured. Now fracture the scene. In one branch, she obeys his plea to stay, and the guilt is purely anticipatory. In another, the divergence is finalized when she trails them under the invisibility cloak, or apparates after them with a borrowed broom and a stolen visitor's badge from her Ministry-employed aunt. The Department of Mysteries becomes not just a maze of spinning rooms, but a kill box for loyalty. A curse that misses Harry by inches slams her into a shelf of prophecies. Glass detonates. Time itself screams. Neville's broken nose is canon. Her shattered ribs are new. When Sirius falls through the veil, Harry's reality implodes along 2 axes at once. He has failed his godfather. He has also dragged his secret girlfriend into a war she was never supposed to touch this directly, and the trauma of almost losing her, of watching her crumple under a purple jet that might have been worse, locks onto the same neural pathway as Sirius's outstretched hand. Afterward, in the hospital wing, every bandage on her body is a footnote to his original lie, which is why, in Dumbledore's office, when he smashes instruments and screams about being kept in the dark, there is one omission that rings louder than the shattering glass. He never says her name. He does not tell Dumbledore that the prophecy did not just cost him Sirius, it nearly cost him the one person he has deliberately hidden from the headmaster's omniscient gaze. And the real question, hanging in the smoke of those ruined devices, is simple. How long can he keep pretending she doesn't exist, now that fate has noticed her? Half-Blood Prince, Jealousy, Horcruxes, and a Fractured Trio. Half-Blood Prince opens with an invisible 4th presence in the Gryffindor common room dynamic. On the surface, Harry is the same. Quidditch captain, chosen one, occasional disaster with homework. Underneath, he is running 2 parallel timelines. One is public and canon-coded, the slow burn crush on Ginny Weasley. He notices her in the corridors, feels that lurch in his stomach when she laughs with Dean, and experiences that infamous monster in his chest. But in this reality, we deconstruct a timeline where that reaction is compromised evidence. Is he drawn to Ginny as a person, or to the idea of a relationship that is visible, safe, and Weasley approved? A sanctioned answer to the question of who Harry Potter is allowed to love. The core issue is mechanical. Harry is already in a functioning, emotionally stabilizing relationship that must never surface above the waterline. His secret girlfriend has been the one riding him over the summer, grounding him after the Department of Mysteries, reminding him that Sirius's death is trauma, not destiny. So when he feels that surge of attraction to Ginny, the psychological question is brutal. Is this genuine, or is his subconscious hunting for a decoy, a way to protect the real target by offering the world a more convenient one? Hermione, of course, notices the wrong things first. She clocks the late-night absences from the boys' dormitory, the extra layer of calm that settles over Harry after certain aimless walks, the coded lines in his homework margins that do not scan as notes. How long can he keep vanishing under the invisibility cloak before she realizes the pattern? Not very. The turning point arrives when she sees that his emotional volatility has a rhythm, chaos around Quidditch, steadiness after unexplained meetings. Hermione doesn't know who she is, but she knows there is a she. That knowledge reframes Slughorn's memory. Canon Harry is desperate to secure the Horcrux information, because the war demands it. This Harry is racing a different clock. Every delay in extracting the truth from Slughorn is not just another year of abstract suffering, it is another week in which his girlfriend's name might accidentally surface in Death Eater intelligence. When he doses Slughorn with Felix Felicis, the subtext is brutal. This is not just about prophecy, it is about reducing the window in which she can be leveraged. Ron, meanwhile, feels the fracture without understanding its shape. His best friend is withholding something enormous, moving with a secrecy that reads, in Weasley terms, as either arrogance or distrust. When Ron spirals into Lavender Brown's arms, the Lavender subplot becomes messier, part comic relief, part retaliation against a friend who clearly has a private life and will not share it. Their fight after the Quidditch victory is no longer only about perceived glory hogging, it is about Ron intuiting that Harry trusts someone else more. All of this culminates in the cave and the astronomy tower. In the boat across the black water, Harry is not only thinking of the locket, he is silently calculating escape routes, wondering whether he can get back to Hogwarts in time to send one more warning, one more coded owl. Then Dumbledore falls. In canon, that death annihilates Harry's strategic safety net. Here, their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated on a different axis. Dumbledore was the one adult who might have understood a hidden Muggle-born partner, a secret Slytherin, or a politically inconvenient match and still protected her. With him gone, the divergence is finalized. Harry is no longer just the boy who lived. He is the sole custodian of a war plan and of one forbidden name that can never, ever reach Voldemort's ears. So when he stands over Dumbledore's body, wand useless at his side, the real vow he makes is double. Destroy the Horcruxes, and keep her alive long enough to see a world where their relationship does not have to be a liability. The question, moving into Deathly Hallows, is simple. What happens when the only way to protect her is to walk into the forest alone, without telling her why? Deathly Hallows. Part 1. Horcrux Hunt with a Hidden Anchor. So when Deathly Hallows opens in this timeline, Harry walks into the will reading with two secrets pressing on his ribs. The plan to hunt Horcruxes, and the girl he's refusing to say goodbye to properly. The room is full of legal formalities, but for him, the core issue is mechanical. Every bequest from Dumbledore is a reminder that his life is already mortgaged to the war, while his relationship has no document, no witness, no protection. At the wedding, this fracture becomes unbearable. Canon Harry watches Ginny from a distance. This Harry scans the crowd for one specific face and forces himself not to move toward her. She laughs with her friends, raises a glass, unaware that in a few hours, he intends to vanish into the wilderness on what is, in honest terms, a suicide mission. He dances with her once, maybe twice, and the subtext is brutal. Every touch is a counterfeit of a future he does not intend to survive. Then, the attack comes. Their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated in an instant, in the chaos. He has a choice that never existed in the original timeline. Does he drag her to safety, exposing their connection to anyone watching, or does he trust her training, trust her wand, and run in the opposite direction because proximity to him is a death sentence? He chooses the latter. It haunts him for the rest of the hunt. On the run, the problem of communication becomes its own psychological horcrux. He knows the DA coins can be repurposed. The Protean charm offers a lifeline that is almost untraceable, but every message is also a trail, every signal a potential map for Voldemort. We deconstruct a timeline where Harry sits in a freezing tent, thumb over a blank galleon, rehearsing coded phrases he never sends. The silence protects her. The silence destroys him. This is where the locket grows teeth. In canon, it taunts him with Ginny, with his parents, with failure. Here, it whispers a different thesis. You are not only doomed, you are selfish for loving someone you cannot keep alive. It shows him images of her captured, used as bait, their secret dragged into the open, and paraded through the Daily Prophet. The magic is simple. The attack is psychological. It tells him, over and over, that Voldemort will find the one thing he has not sacrificed and break it first. Ron feels this long before he can articulate it. The dynamic in the tent is off. Harry hesitates before answering questions, shuts his journal when Ron walks in, stares at that inert galleon with a grief that makes no sense if it is only a DA relic. When Ron explodes, it is not just about food and direction, it is about access, about realizing there is a sealed chamber in Harry's life that he, the supposed best friend, has never been allowed to enter. The divergence is finalized when Ron leaves and Harry does not run after him, because the person he most wants to run to is someone he has already chosen not to contact. Then, the turning point arrives in the forest pool. The silver doe appears, ethereal, deliberate. Snape's silent argument that Harry must live long enough to finish this. As Harry follows it, half drowned, half frozen, another image cuts across the Patronus's glow. Her own Patronus, cast in some forgotten corridor. A small, stubborn creature that had once made him laugh. Pattern interrupt. The sword is not just a tool to kill Horcruxes. It is a promise that survival is an obligation. He is no longer fighting only to die well. He is fighting to earn the right to walk back into the light where that Patronus waits and explain why he disappeared without a word. Deathly Hallows, Part 2, The Forest, the Resurrection, Stone, and a Choice. So what does it mean then to walk into the forest when you are not alone in the world, but structurally entangled with one hidden person? What does it mean to decide to die when your death is also a deliberate act of abandonment? In this forest, the moral geometry of Harry's choice is fundamentally altered. Canon gives us a clean equation. Harry discovers he is a Horcrux, understands that his death is mechanically required to end Voldemort, and accepts it. Here, the core issue is mechanical, but the psychology is not. He is not just sacrificing himself, he is choosing to vanish from the life of a girl who has spent years believing she is his one exception to isolation, with no explanation, no context, and no chance at closure. The subtext is brutal. He is engineering her future trauma as the price of everyone else's survival. Watch The Walk. In the original timeline, he passes Ginny with a kind of resigned tenderness. In this fractured reality, he passes corridors where they once met in secret, hears the echo of whispered arguments about risk and power, feels the weight of every promise he cannot keep. Does he turn aside? Does he sprint up one staircase, knock on a door, and say her name just once more? He does not, because if he sees her, he will not keep walking. So instead, he compromises. He pulls Neville aside, as in canon, and gives him the task of killing Nagini if Harry fails. But in this timeline, the divergence is finalized with one additional sentence, a name. If anything happens to me, make sure she gets out. He does not explain the dynamic, does not define the relationship, only trusts that Neville's loyalty will extend to an unnamed girl in the chaos. It is a cowardly bravery. He protects her without ever admitting what she is to him. Then, the resurrection stone turns in his fingers, and we deconstruct a timeline. James, Lily, Sirius, Lupin, they appear as expected, forming that spectral guard, but there is an absence that roars. If she is dead by this point, killed in the earlier assaults on Hogwarts, or in a Snatcher's raid, she stands among them, confused and furious, demanding to know why he is only now joining her. If she lives, the gap where her figure should be becomes the loudest presence in the clearing. He realizes that even with ultimate magic in his hand, he cannot have her and this destiny simultaneously. Reality is uncompromising. Voldemort casts the curse. Harry falls. And here the turning point arrives, not in King's Cross, but in the moment Voldemort's soul brushes Harry's mind. For a second, through the fractured connection, Voldemort sees a flash, a face he does not recognize, a hand clutching Gryffindor colors. a half-remembered Patronus. He dismisses it as irrelevant sentiment. He is wrong. That single unidentifiable image becomes a ticking hazard for the epilogue. Harry wakes in King's Cross, makes his choice, returns. The battle resumes. Somewhere in the castle, she is dueling, bleeding, surviving. When the dust settles, the world will demand a symbol, a savior, a legend reconstructed into clean narrative. But Harry is returning as something messier, a boy who died, came back, and still owes one person the truth. The credits do not roll when Voldemort falls. They roll when she looks at him across the ruined Great Hall, realizes he chose to leave her without a word, and asks the one question no prophecy prepared him to answer. After the war, epilogue, rewritten, and the price of secrecy. So what happens after she asks that question in the rubble of the Great Hall? What does a relationship built on strategic absence do when absence is no longer a tactical choice, but a habit? In this section, we deconstruct a timeline where the war ends, but the secrecy does not obediently dissolve with Voldemort's body. Version 1 is the fantasy ending. She survives. They talk. The confession is not poetic. It is administrative. Harry lays out the map of lies, the fake detentions, the redirected letters, the occlumency walls he held against Snape and, increasingly, against his own friends. She listens. The turning point arrives when she says, very quietly, that if he could outmaneuver Dumbledore, he can certainly manage a profit headline. In this reality, they go public. The Chosen One stands beside a woman the narrative never prepared the wizarding world to see. Here, the core issue is mechanical. If she is Slytherin, or the daughter of a Death Eater who defected at the 11th hour, Harry's declaration is not just romantic, it is political. Imagine the Ministry press conference. Harry, still gaunt from the war, steps up to the podium, and behind him stands a witch in green and silver, her family name whispered with suspicion in half the room. The subtext is brutal. His loyalty is no longer just to Gryffindor, or the DA, but to a person whose existence fractures the clean, light versus dark structure that Kingsley's new regime is trying to sell. Version 2 is quieter and crueler. She dies off-page, in a skirmish Harry never sees, or in the months of chaotic reprisals that follow. Canon Harry carries grief for Lupin, Tonks, Fred, and Snape. Here, there is an additional invisible name on the list. It changes the psychological texture of his mourning. When he visits the memorial at Hogwarts, he is not just the public symbol of survival, he is a man scanning the stone for a secret. Ginny, in this configuration, remains plausible. Their marriage becomes a compromise between private trauma and public expectation. He chooses a partner the world already understands, because the one it never knew is now a ghost he cannot explain. Version 3 is the fracture. She lives, but the secrecy that kept her safe has poisoned the dynamic. Years of lies to Ron and Hermione, of pretending indifference in front of Ginny, of using occlumency not as weapon, but as permanent shield around his own heart, have trained Harry to flinch from transparency. When the war ends, she demands a real life. He discovers he has no practice being visible, and the divergence is finalized on Platform 9 3/4. Pattern interrupt, we know the epilogue, or we think we do. Camera 1, Canon, Harry with Ginny, their children, the easy banter about Albus Severus and Slytherin, the domestic normalcy, J.K. Rowling locked into place. Camera 2, a few yards down the platform. In this timeline, whether he married Ginny, married her, or married no one, Harry feels the air shift. He looks up. There, in the crowd, stands a woman in green and silver, older now, the war etched into the set of her shoulders. Perhaps she wears a discreet Auror badge. Perhaps she holds the hand of a child whose eyes flicker to Harry's scar with unspoken recognition. They do not speak. They do not need to. Reality has split, the life he lives, and the life he hid so thoroughly that it can only exist in the negative space of that glance. The wizarding world sees only the famous father waving at the train. The audience, in this reconstructed epilogue, sees the cost of the secret he never truly put down. Closing the loop, what this changes about Harry Potter. In that single closing image, the divergence is finalized. Canon Harry waves as a husband and father. This Harry is also an ex-covert operative of his own heart, a man who once ran an underground relationship through the corridors of a boarding school at war. So what have we actually changed? What if the boy who lived is not primarily the avatar of abstract love, friends, school, found family, but a teenager anchored to one forbidden person he must protect at all costs? The answer is structural. The entire psychological architecture of his heroism tilts. Every risk calculation, every nighttime wander, every argument with Dumbledore now roots through a single dangerous question. Does this endanger her? Revisit Chamber of Secrets under that lens. The basilisk is no longer just a school-wide threat. It is a sniper Harry cannot see, hunting corridors his girlfriend might be walking through alone. The fear tightens. His decision to descend into the chamber becomes less chivalric spectacle and more a frantic attempt to control an uncontrollable variable. The subtext is brutal. If he fails, he does not merely lose Hogwarts. He loses the one person he cannot even name in the hospital wing without exposing her to new danger. By the Triwizard Tournament, the core issue is mechanical. Those tasks are no longer tests of courage. They are scheduled opportunities for the world to discover his weak point. The lake task, with its hostages, becomes a psychological horror scenario for him. Is she down there, bound and unconscious, used as leverage by rules he never consented to? Even when she is not physically present, her absence is a constant pressure, teaching him Slytherin habits, misdirection, contingency planning, a paranoia that looks a lot like maturity from the outside. Occlumency, in this timeline, is not an academic failure arc, it is crisis management. Harry is not only trying to keep Voldemort out, he is trying to keep Snape away from the memory of a hand in his under the library table, a whispered promise in the room of requirement, a Muggle train platform rendezvous that would ruin her family if exposed. We deconstruct a timeline where privacy is not teenage melodrama, but counterintelligence. His loyalty to her forces him into secrecy, even from Ron and Hermione, hairline fractures that subtly rewire the trio dynamic. And then the forest. He walks to his death, knowing that one life, somewhere behind the battle lines, will be shattered by a truth she can never publicly mourn. The turning point arrives, not when he accepts mortality, but when he accepts that saving the world means deliberately breaking the heart he has spent 7 years hiding. Love still saves him, but in this reality, it also sharpens him, making him more cunning, more morally ambiguous, blurring the tidy boundary between Gryffindor bravery and Slytherin self-preservation. His power is not cleaner, it is compromised, human, and therefore, arguably, truer. So who is she in your version? A Muggle who forces him to translate magic into metaphor. A Slytherin whose common room becomes enemy territory and sanctuary in the same breath. A DA member whose Patronus and his move in silent synchrony during the Battle of Hogwarts? Which scenes do you rewrite? The Yule Ball, the DA meetings, Godric's Hollow, and does this Harry feel more authentic to you, or simply darker? If you want to keep breaking this reality, cast your vote in the comments. Tell me who she is, how it ends, and which fracture we should open next. What if Ginny Weasley had been sorted into Slytherin? What if Severus Snape had raised Harry from infancy? Subscribe, like, and share this episode as your way of choosing the next timeline we dismantle, because as long as these what-ifs keep coming, their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated.